My name is Olivia Monroe. I found out at my father's funeral that I might not be his daughter, and worse, that I wouldn't inherit a cent of what he promised me. While everyone else mourned, my stepmother handed me a lie so cruel it could destroy everything. But she had no idea I wouldn't just accept it. Where are you watching this video from? Let me know in the comments. Because if this happened in your family, what would you do? I used to believe grief was the worst kind of silence. But standing there in that cold church, surrounded by faces half hidden in shadow and insincerity, I learned there's something worse: being erased. My father, Daniel Monroe, lay in the open casket just feet away, dressed in the navy suit he wore for every big moment. Birthdays, graduations, my high school recital where he clapped the loudest. His hands, now still, had once hoisted me on his shoulders and called me baby girl. But today, no one called me anything. No one even looked at me. Until she did. Linda, technically my stepmother, emotionally, something far colder. She walked toward me with that familiar click of her heels, chin raised like she owned the pews, the pulpit, the grief itself. Her lipstick hadn't even smudged. "You should know," she whispered, sliding a sealed folder into my hands with a hiss of paper. "You're not even his daughter, so don't expect a dime." I blinked. I thought I misheard. Maybe it was the incense or the way grief slows time. But no. She stared at me with the icy calm of someone who'd been waiting for this moment. Her perfectly manicured finger tapped the label on the folder. Adoption Records, Olivia Monroe. What is this?" I croaked, fingers numb around the manila envelope. She didn't answer. She just turned on her heel and walked back toward my half-brother and half-sister, her children, not his, though they were always treated like royalty. Then Mr. Greaves, the family lawyer, always in charcoal suits and morally ambiguous smiles, stepped up to the podium as the organ music faded. "Before we close today's services," he began, "there is one matter of estate clarification I've been asked to address." He glanced at me, then at Linda. She gave a single, satisfied nod. "According to documents submitted and reviewed prior to Mr. Monroe's passing, it appears Olivia Monroe was adopted, and therefore is not a biological heir." No pause. No kindness. The words echoed like a gunshot through the chapel. Heads turned. A few people gasped. My cousin dropped her program, and I felt the floor tilt. My father's casket blurred before me. I stumbled back into the pew, gripping the wood to steady myself. Somewhere behind me, my half-brother Mark muttered something about the Corvette. My half-sister Lily giggled and said, "Guess we don't have to share, huh?" I couldn't breathe. Every instinct screamed to run, to scream, to demand anyone, stand up and say it was a mistake. That Daniel Monroe didn't just let me believe I was his daughter for 32 years. That I wasn't some charity case. But no one spoke. The funeral ended in a blur. Someone touched my shoulder, sympathy, I think. I shook them off. Outside, the Georgia sun mocked me with its warmth. I stood alone by the church steps, the folder still in my hands, fingers shaking as I opened it. The documents were stamped, signed, dated. Adopted at 6 months. A name I didn't recognize listed under biological mother. I stared at it, heart pounding. I couldn't tell if it was real. I couldn't tell if I was. Behind me, Linda's voice rang out as she laughed with the guests. "So good of you to come. Daniel always loved hosting." Hosting, he was dead. And she was already claiming the house, the estate, the story. I glanced back at the casket, the flowers, the black streamers. And in that moment, I made a silent vow. If she lied to bury me, I'd dig up the truth, even if it meant unearthing every secret she'd hidden. When I finally got back to my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. It felt safer in the dim gray blur of twilight. The folder was still in my hands, creased now from where I'd clutched it all the way from the church to my car, to the parking garage, up the elevator. I dropped it on the floor beside my coffee table and sank down cross-legged, still wearing the black dress that suddenly felt like a costume. My fingertips hovered over the adoption papers like they might burn me. But eventually, I opened them again. There it was, printed in bold. Olivia Renee Monroe, adopted. Date of adoption, March 2, 1994. Agency, Hope Haven Home. I whispered it under my breath like a question. Hope Haven? That didn't even sound real. "He called me his baby girl," I murmured. "Every year on my birthday, he sang to me. He built me that stupid treehouse that collapsed after one summer. My voice cracked. It wasn't just grief anymore. It was this hollow, gnawing confusion, like I was grieving a person who might never have existed. The lock clicked at the door, and Jessica's voice floated in a moment later. "Liv, I brought coffee." I couldn't answer. She found me in the living room, still on the floor, and immediately sank beside me. Jessica had been my best friend since we were 12, braces, thrift store jackets, and sleepovers with too much popcorn. She looked down at the papers, then at me. "What the hell is this?" My life, or not my life, I don't know. I let out a laugh that wasn't funny. "Linda gave them to me at the funeral, right before Mr. Greaves told everyone I wasn't his." Jessica picked up the papers carefully. Her eyes scanned them fast, flipping pages like she was afraid to leave anything unread. And this lawyer just announced it to the room, like he was reading a grocery list. Jessica's lips tightened. "Cold-blooded doesn't even begin to cover it. Are you okay?" I almost said yes. Instead, I pressed my palms into my eyes until I saw colors. "I don't know. I feel like a glitch. Like someone hit delete on who I am and everyone else got the memo before me." Jessica set the coffee down and wrapped her arm around my shoulder. "Okay. First of all, no, you are you, these people. Linda and those smug demons she calls children. They can't erase 32 years of being loved. And second," she pulled the paper listing Hope Haven from the pile, "we're going to figure this out, together." I didn't say anything, but my hand closed around hers. We sat like that for a long time. The sun slipped behind the skyline, casting long blue shadows across the hardwood floor. The apartment smelled like jasmine from the candle I'd forgotten to blow out that morning. Normal things in a suddenly unrecognizable life. Eventually, Jessica asked, "Did he ever say anything about adoption, anything weird?" I shook my head. "Never, not once. He used to tell me I had his mom's eyes, that I scrunched my nose the way she did when I was annoyed." Jessica flipped through the documents again, frowning. "And there's no birth certificate in here." I looked at her. "There should be, right? If you're adopted, yes. Even if you weren't, your birth certificate would be part of this file if it's official." She paused. "Olivia, what if this is fake?" A beat passed. My heart stuttered. "What if it's not real?" I repeated. She met my gaze. "I'm serious. What if Linda had these made up? What if she's trying to push you out so her kids get everything?" It was too much. Too big, too twisted. But something inside me, something primal and wounded, wanted to believe it. Because believing I wasn't his daughter, that he lied for decades, that he left me nothing, that was worse than any conspiracy. "I don't know," I said quietly. "I don't know what's worse, if she faked them or if she didn't." Jessica reached for her coffee. "Then let's find out." I blinked. "What?" "Let's start digging. Hope Haven, maybe it still exists. Maybe someone there remembers what happened. Maybe someone remembers you." She leaned in. "If there's even a chance this is a lie, Liv, you deserve to know." Pulse beat hard in my chest. "You really think we could find something?" Jessica smiled, but it was the kind with teeth. "I think Linda's the kind of woman who plays dirty, and I'm not letting her win." 3 days later, I found myself gripping the steering wheel like it might dissolve if I let go. The GPS guided us through the industrial outskirts of Atlanta, past abandoned gas stations and rusting warehouses with shattered windows. The kind of place you speed through on your way to somewhere better. The adoption documents had listed a single address under orphanage of record, Hope Haven Home. It sounded like something out of a fairy tale, but the deeper we drove, the more that name started to feel like a cruel joke. Jessica sat beside me, her coffee long gone and both feet on the dash. "You sure this is the place?" I nodded without answering. We turned down a gravel road, the tires crunching with a sound that echoed louder than it should have. And then we saw it, or what was left of it. "Whoa," Jessica whispered. It was a carcass of a building, charred black in places, hollowed out in others. A chain-link fence half fallen in the dirt. The letters Hope Haven Home still clung to the cracked cement sign at the entrance, but someone had spray-painted a red X across the name and scribbled something beneath it in angry slashes. "No haven here." I pulled the car over and killed the engine. A heavy silence filled the space between us. We got out. The ground felt soft, like ash had settled into the soil and never fully left. The front steps led to a gaping doorway, its frame splintered and blackened. Jessica hesitated. "Should we go in?" I nodded again because I had no words left. Inside, the air was stale, wood, mold, and the ghost of smoke. There was no roof anymore, just open sky and broken beams like skeleton fingers pointing at nothing. Burnt remnants of a stairwell curled upward and ended midair. No files, no desks, no photos, nothing that looked like an institution for children. We wandered through what might have once been a hallway. A few scorched doors hung loose from hinges. A child's shoe lay forgotten in the corner, dusty and warped by heat. "This place must have gone down in a fire," Jessica murmured. I crouched near the shoe, something hollow building in my chest. "I was here," I whispered. "If the papers are real, then I spent the first 6 months of my life in this place." Jessica scanned the soot-black walls. "There's no way this place kept records. Even if they did, they're toast now." I stood slowly. The weight of disappointment pressed harder than I expected. I had come here chasing facts, something to prove what Linda said was a lie. Or maybe, if I was honest, I came hoping I'd find some magical document that said, "No, Olivia, you belong." But there was nothing. Just a ruined building and a name I no longer trusted. "I was so sure," I said. "I thought if I could just find this place, I'd understand." "Something, anything." Jessica touched my arm gently. "You still might. This is just one piece of it. And this," she gestured to the wreckage, "this might be proof of something too." I gave her a look. "Proof of what?" "That someone doesn't want you to find answers." Her words hung there, charged and speculative. But what unsettled me most was how possible it felt. Who would burn down an orphanage, unless it was already abandoned? And if it was abandoned, why were my records coming from here now? My thoughts tangled themselves into knots. "I need air," I muttered, stepping back into the open. Outside, I stared at the crumbling sign again. Hope Haven. It felt like an accusation. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of the building, the sign, the graffiti, just in case. Jessica came up beside me. "Hey, even ruins can talk. We'll figure this out." I nodded, but I felt hollow. Like I'd brought my grief to a graveyard and found the headstone smashed. Back in the car, I just sat for a moment before starting the engine. "If this place is gone," I asked, voice barely above a whisper, "what else did they bury?" Jessica didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, serious and protective. "Then we dig somewhere else." There's a certain kind of quiet that only comes when everything you used to believe is gone. I had felt it in the funeral parlor. I'd felt it standing in the ashes of that orphanage. But nothing prepared me for the feeling of standing in front of my childhood home as a stranger. The family estate wasn't a mansion, but to me, it always felt like a castle, tucked behind tall hedges, with ivy crawling up the brick and creaky floorboards that told stories when the house settled at night. I used to tiptoe down the hallway to sneak cookies from the kitchen, terrified I'd wake Dad. He always knew, though, always left an extra one out for me on the counter. Now the porch lights glared down like floodlights. Linda had changed the locks the day after the funeral. I wasn't even surprised. I stood on the front step, waiting, watching my reflection in the brass door plate. When the door finally cracked open, she was already scowling. Linda, blonde, polished, and every inch a woman who'd got her way for too long. "You've got 5 minutes," she snapped. "Anything you don't take, I'm throwing out." "No hello," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Not even a how's the grieving daughter." She crossed her arms, blocking the entry. "You're not his daughter, and I'm being generous." Her words didn't hit like they had at the funeral. Maybe because I'd already started to doubt the papers. Or maybe I was done giving her the power to break me. "I just want what's mine, a few personal things." She sighed dramatically, stepping aside just enough for me to squeeze through. 5 minutes, I mean it. The moment I stepped inside, it felt like someone else's house. Furniture rearranged. Dad's recliner replaced with a sleek white loveseat that looked like it belonged in a catalog, not a home. I moved quickly upstairs to my old room. The door still had the Lives World sticker I'd put up in 6th grade. Inside, it was nearly empty. My bookshelf was bare, my closet gutted. I grabbed the shoebox of photos I'd hidden in the top drawer of my old desk. A few high school yearbooks, the old sweatshirt Dad used to wear on Sunday mornings. I turned to leave, then froze. The hallway mirror. It hung just a little crooked. Dad always fixed it. Always. I reached up to adjust it, and as I did, my elbow bumped the nearby cabinet. Something on top wobbled and fell with a dusty thunk. It was a leather-bound album. old, fraying at the edges. I bent down to pick it up, my fingers brushing against the soft, worn cover. A wave of familiarity hit me, my grandmother's handwriting looping and neat across the spine. Family Summers. My chest tightened. I hadn't seen this in years. Thought it had disappeared when Grandma passed. Footsteps thudded downstairs. "Time's up," Linda called, her voice sharp as glass. "I'm coming," I shouted back, but my hands didn't move. I flipped open the album just to look, just to see if something, anything, still tethered me to this place. Pages of beach photos, cookouts, fireworks. One photo in particular stopped me cold. It was my grandmother sitting on a beach towel, laughing mid-laugh like someone had caught her telling a story. She wore a navy one-piece swimsuit, sun hat crooked on her head, and there on her shoulder a dark crescent-shaped birthmark. I blinked. My own shoulder started to tingle as if in recognition. I pulled my sleeve down and looked. There it was, same shape, same placement, same mark. I stared at the photo again, breath caught somewhere between my ribs and throat. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't imagination. Genetics don't lie. If she was blood, if she had this mark, then now, Olivia. Linda's voice was closer. I slammed the album shut, heart racing, and tucked it under my arm. When I passed her in the hallway, she gave me a smug glance. "Find anything worth the trip," I smiled. A quiet, dangerous smile. "More than you think." She watched me leave, suspicion flickering behind her perfectly mascaraed eyes. But I didn't stop. I walked down the steps, through the front gate, all the way to my car before I let myself breathe again. I didn't have proof. Not yet, but I had a seed. A single photo, a birthmark, and the start of a very different story than the one Linda was trying to sell. Back in my apartment, the photo album sat on my bed like something sacred. I didn't even take my shoes off. I just dropped my bag, kicked the door shut behind me, and pulled the curtains closed before flipping it open again under the soft pool of my desk lamp. I turned to that page. That photo. There she was, Grandma me, sitting on the beach at Tybee Island, I think. The striped umbrella, the familiar navy swimsuit. And there it was again, that dark crescent birthmark on her left shoulder, just below the collarbone. Exactly where mine was. My fingers hovered above the page, and I whispered into the stillness, "That's my mark." I had never questioned it before. It was just part of me. A small shadow I'd grown up with. Dad used to kiss it when I was little and call it my lucky moon. "Passed down from strong women," he'd say. I always thought he meant it symbolically. But this was blood, DNA, proof. I pressed my hand over my shoulder, suddenly overwhelmed. My heart was thudding so loud it felt like a drumbeat in my ears. If Grandmommy had it, then she was my biological grandmother. And if she was blood, then Dad wasn't some man who adopted me out of charity. He was my father. He had to be. Because Linda wouldn't fake a photo album. This wasn't a document you could forge. This was a moment in time, sunlight, laughter, the shape of a woman's shoulder in a bathing suit that no one had touched in years. I traced the image with my fingertip, barely breathing. It hit me then. This might be the first real piece of truth I had. Not paper, not words, not legal jargon or cold signatures, just a photograph faded at the edges, whispering what no one else had dared to say. "You were his." I flipped through the rest of the album with care. There were photos of me as a toddler in Dad's lap, both of us grinning like fools. Photos of Grandma brushing my hair on the porch. Of all of us laughing at a barbecue, playing cards, building sandcastles. They weren't just pictures, they were evidence of love, of a family. And every one of them made Linda's story fall apart a little more. I picked up my phone, snapped a picture of the beach photo, and texted it to Jessica. Tell me I'm not imagining this," she called immediately. "You're not," she said without even saying hello. "That's your birthmark, Liv, same exact shape. You've had it since we were kids. I used to say it looked like a sideways comma." I let out a soft, breathy laugh. "You really remember that?" "I remember everything when it comes to you," she said gently. This is huge. It means I'm not adopted," I said slowly, like I needed to say it out loud to believe it. "It means Linda lied. Or someone did, but we're getting closer. You feel it, right?" I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "Yeah, I do." I spent the rest of the night cross-legged on my bed, photos spread out around me like puzzle pieces waiting for the full picture to emerge. I couldn't sleep, not really. But for the first time since the funeral, my heart didn't feel so heavy. There was still a long road ahead. I knew that. But now I had a question that wouldn't let go. If she lied about this, what else did she fake? It's a strange thing, walking into a stranger's office holding the key to your entire identity. The man I was about to meet wasn't family, friend, or therapist. But if he told me what I suspected, what I needed to hear, he could become the person who finally pulled me out of the fog. Mr. Deeks operated out of a converted duplex in a quiet neighborhood east of downtown Atlanta. A bronze plaque beside the door read, "Deeks Document Verification Services." Simple, direct. I rang the bell with a hand that trembled just enough to make me tuck it in my coat pocket afterward. He opened the door himself, mid-60s, iron-gray hair, a corduroy jacket, and glasses that hung halfway down his nose. He reminded me more of a retired professor than a forensic expert. "Olivia Monroe?" he asked, voice like gravel and warm tea. "Yes," I replied. "You come highly recommended." "Well," he said, stepping aside, "let's hope I live up to it. Come in." His office was lined with shelves of dusty legal books, thick reference manuals, and framed articles about famous forgery cases. A large desk stood beneath a bright inspection lamp, and behind it, a magnification monitor I didn't understand but found comfortingly official. I handed him the envelope of documents. He didn't speak right away, just settled into his chair, adjusted his glasses, and began flipping through them with practiced fingers. "Adoption records," he asked without looking up. "So they say," I replied. "I need to know if they're real." He turned to a page, angled it beneath the light, then pulled a small loop from his desk drawer and peered through it. Silence stretched. I didn't interrupt. Finally, he sat back, tapping the edge of the paper. "These are good, very good. Whoever did this knew what they were doing." My throat tightened. But they're not authentic." My heart slammed once hard against my ribs. "What?" He tapped again, more firmly this time. "The seal here, that's a replication, not embossed. And this ink, it's not era accurate. The signature's printed, not handwritten. Whoever created this used high-grade forgery techniques, but they slipped up." I blinked, barely breathing. "So you're saying it's fake?" "As a $3 bill," he said plainly. "It might pass with the untrained eye, but it wouldn't hold up in court." I stared at the document like it had just morphed into something alive and poisonous. Linda lied. She didn't just lie. She orchestrated a fraud. She manufactured a new version of my past and presented it in front of a room full of mourners while my father's body lay in a coffin 5 feet away. All to shut me out, to take everything. "Can you write a report?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. "Already started one," he said, scribbling into a legal pad. "I'll give you the full forensic breakdown by the end of the week." I nodded. "Thank you." He looked up then, tilting his head slightly. "You okay, Miss Monroe?" "No," I said honestly, "but I'm closer." He gave a small smile. "Good answer." I stepped outside, and the fall air hit like a wake-up call, crisp, sharp, and oddly cleansing. I stood there on the porch for a moment, the city humming faintly in the background. Everything inside me buzzed with the one truth I had desperately hoped to find. She lied. I was his daughter, and now I had proof. The Atlanta Police Department doesn't look how TV makes it seem. No chaos, no shouting. Just rows of desks, tired eyes staring at screens, and the smell of old coffee and carpet that had seen better decades. I sat on a bench just inside the lobby, the forged documents clutched in a folder on my lap, and a copy of Mr. Deeks's preliminary report clipped to the front. I had called the non-emergency line, explained the situation as best I could, and asked to speak to someone in white-collar crime. They scheduled me for this appointment. Now all I had to do was walk in and say it out loud. My stepmother forged adoption papers to steal my inheritance. It still sounded unbelievable, even to me. A tall woman in plain clothes approached from down the hall. Early 40s, dark blazer hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail. Sharp features, eyes that scanned before they spoke. "Olivia Monroe?" I stood. "Yes. I'm Detective Marla Brooks. Come on back." Her office was small but neat. One window, one desk, 2 chairs. She motioned for me to sit and took the chair across from me. No smile, just patience. "So," she said, folding her hands, "walk me through it." I opened the folder slowly, placing the documents and the report between us. Then I began. I told her about the funeral, about Linda, about how she handed me papers in front of mourners like a queen declaring exile. I told her how Mr. Greaves, my father's lawyer, confirmed the documents on the spot, how I spiraled, doubted, questioned, how I went to the orphanage and found nothing but a burned-out husk. Then I told her about the photo, the birthmark, my grandmother, the night I stared at my shoulder in the mirror and realized blood doesn't lie. I ended with Mr. Deeks's findings, the forged seal, the wrong ink, the printed signature. He said it wouldn't hold up in court, I finished. Marla hadn't taken any notes during the story, but now she flipped through the documents, reading the report carefully. When she finally looked up, her face had changed, just slightly, not friendlier, but more engaged. "This Deeks guy," she said. "You trust him. He's worked for the state before, forensic expert, very thorough." She nodded. "I've read his testimony in a case 2 years ago. He's solid." She tapped the paper. "If this is accurate, your stepmother's in deep trouble." I let out a shaky breath. "So there's something you can do." "I'm opening a case file today," she said. "We'll need to subpoena some of the original documents, Greaves's files, estate records, anything submitted officially. But if these are forgeries and she used them to influence an inheritance, we're talking serious fraud, possibly criminal conspiracy." "Will Linda know right away?" "No, we keep it quiet at first. The less she knows we're investigating, the better." Something in me tightened. "She's smart, manipulative." Marla leaned back. "Good, so are we." There was something deeply comforting about her calm. She wasn't emotional like Jessica. She wasn't tangled in family memories like I was. She was a professional with a folder full of facts and a look that said, "I know how to fight this." I stood to leave, pausing in the doorway. "Detective Brooks," she looked up. I need to know I'm not crazy." She tilted her head. "Do crazy people usually bring forensic reports and forged legal papers to the police?" I smiled, small and real. "Sit tight," she said. "I'll be in touch soon." As I stepped out into the sun, my phone buzzed with a message from Jessica. "You good?" I stared at the screen, then typed. "Yeah, for the first time I think I am. I didn't expect to hear from Detective Brooks so soon." But 2 days after my visit, her name flashed across my phone screen just as I was pouring cereal. Morning light filtered through the blinds, and for a second it all felt weirdly normal. Then her voice, calm but clipped, brought everything crashing back. "Olivia, we've uncovered something." "Are you sitting down?" That question never leads to anything casual. I dropped into a chair, heart pounding. "What is it?" "We've arrested someone," she said. "Your stepmother's attorney, Mr. Greaves. He was withholding key evidence from the estate files. Specifically, a second version of your father's will." My fingers clenched around the edge of the table. "Wait, what do you mean a second version?" "I mean your father drafted an updated will shortly before his death. This version names you as the sole beneficiary. It overrides the previous document entirely. Greaves had it sealed and never submitted it for probate." I stared at my reflection in the microwave door, my face pale and still. "You're saying my dad left everything to me?" "Yes, and they tried to bury it. Literally." Marla's voice dropped an octave. "We found it locked inside Greaves's personal safe, unregistered and concealed. That's obstruction, fraud, and potentially collusion." My mouth went dry. "Why would he do that? Why hide it?" "I'd say money, influence, probably both." She paused. "And your stepmother's involvement isn't just likely, it's obvious. We're building that case now." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. "So where does that leave me?" "With a hell of a lot more leverage," she said, but then her tone shifted, subtle, cautious. "However, I need you to be careful." That stopped me cold. "Why?" "'Cause when people start realizing they're about to lose everything they stole, they don't always play by the rules." A chill rolled over me. "Are you saying I'm in danger?" "I'm saying don't confront anyone directly. Let us handle the pressure. Keep your head down, keep records of everything, and don't trust anyone who suddenly wants to make amends." I swallowed hard. "Okay." After we hung up, I sat in that chair for a long time, phone still in my hand, cereal soggy and forgotten. A secret will. She knew, Linda knew. She looked me in the eye at that funeral, shoved fake adoption papers in my hand, and watched me crumble, knowing my father left everything to me. She buried more than a man. She buried the truth, and Greaves helped her do it. My hands curled into fists on the table. I was shaking, but not from fear, from rage. They tried to erase me twice, once with fake documents and again with a hidden will. They rewrote my story and handed it to the world as fact. But the truth had claws, and it had started to dig back up. Later that night, I told Jessica everything. We sat on my couch, lights dimmed, my voice barely above a whisper. "That lawyer Greaves, he had the real will, the one that says it's all mine." Jessica didn't say anything at first. Then she whispered, "So they lied on every level." "Every level," I echoed. She leaned forward. "What do we do now?" I looked at her, and I knew this was bigger than just clearing my name. "This isn't just about getting what's mine," I said slowly. "It's about making sure they can't do this to anyone else." Jessica nodded. "Then let's finish what they started." We didn't know yet what the courtroom would bring, but I had something now that Linda couldn't fake. Proof. And soon the whole world would see it too. There's a particular kind of silence in a courthouse lobby, not the peaceful kind. The kind that vibrates with nerves, shuffled papers, whispers between attorneys, and heels clicking too fast on marble floors. I sat alone on a wooden bench near the window, hands folded in my lap. A copy of my grandmother's photo, the photo, tucked safely in the inside pocket of my bag. I hadn't told anyone, not even Jessica, that I'd printed it out and slipped it into a frame. It felt like armor. My father's revised will, the forensic report, and every bit of documentation Detective Brooks helped collect were already with my attorney, Elise Grant, a woman with a soft voice and sharp mind, recommended by Brooks, and trusted the moment she looked me in the eye and said, "You're not alone in this anymore." I had never been in a courtroom before, but today I wasn't here for someone else's story. This time, the fight was mine. The doors opened at the far end of the hallway. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Linda. She never wore black unless it was for effect, and today she'd chosen deep navy, dramatic pearl earrings, and a handbag that cost more than my monthly rent. Her children, Mark and Lily, flanked her like bodyguards, both in designer clothes, both pretending they weren't rattled. But I saw it. In the way Linda's mouth tightened when her eyes landed on me, in the subtle shift of her jaw, the flicker of something behind her confidence. Fear. They walked past without a word, but Mark muttered something under his breath, low, smug. I didn't even flinch. I just glanced up at the skylight and reminded myself to breathe. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for the truth. Elise joined me a moment later, a stack of papers in one hand and a quiet smile on her face. She sat beside me and crossed one leg over the other like we were at a brunch instead of a legal battle. "Courtroom B is ready," she said. "You'll be sitting to my left, and I'll walk you through what to expect. Will I have to speak today?" "Not yet. Today's pre-trial review, just documents and presence." She glanced sideways. "Presence matters more than you think." I looked at my reflection in the glass wall, black blazer, steady hands, eyes that had seen too much in the past 2 weeks to ever go back to how they were. "Thank you," I whispered. "For what?" "For believing me." Elise smiled. "The evidence does most of the work. But your courage helps." When we walked into the courtroom, it felt colder than the hallway. The walls, the bench, the rows of seats all seemed to close in just slightly. Linda and her children were already seated at the defense table, their lawyer whispering something urgently. I took my place beside Elise, sat up straight, clutched the photo in my pocket like a lighthouse. The judge entered. Papers rustled. Introductions were made. And then the opening exchange began, calm, clipped legal phrases about will discrepancies, forensic documentation, and chain of custody. But beneath every word was a current of rising tension. As Elise spoke, laying out the foundation of our claim, Linda didn't look at me once. But Lily did. And when our eyes met, I saw it, just a flicker of doubt. Like she wasn't entirely sure anymore. Like maybe, for the first time, she was wondering if they had gone too far. I didn't smile. I didn't smirk. I just held her gaze, because I wasn't here to win her over. I was here to win back me. I never thought I'd testify in a courtroom with my entire life on the line. But as I sat in that stiff wooden chair, facing the judge, the jury box, and a sea of people who didn't know me, yet somehow held the power to define my future, I realized something strange. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of Linda. Not of being doubted. Not of being erased. Because I knew who I was. Elise's voice rang out first, calm and steady. "Please state your name for the record." "Olivia Renee Monroe." She smiled at me gently. Olivia, can you describe your relationship with the deceased Leonard Monroe? He was my father, I said, voice clear. He raised me. He made me pancakes on Sundays, helped me build school projects, drove me to college tour. He called me his baby girl every year on my birthday. He told me I had my grandmother's eyes and her stubbornness. And every time I fell, he was the one who helped me back up. And did he ever suggest you were adopted? Never, I said without hesitation. He always spoke of me as his daughter. There was never a question. And when did that change? I looked at Linda across the courtroom. Her lips were tight, her hands motionless in her lap. The day of his funeral, I said quietly. Linda handed me adoption papers, told me I wasn't his, told me not to expect a dime. There was a murmur from the gallery. The judge banged the gavel lightly. Order. Elise lifted the forged adoption records. Are these the documents you were shown? Yes. Did you believe them? For a while, I admitted. It broke me. I questioned everything. But then I started looking closer. She handed over the forensic report. And what did you discover? That they were fake. Mr. Deeks, an expert in document analysis, verified they were forged. The seal wasn't authentic. The signature was printed. The ink didn't match the timeline. Linda tried to rewrite my life. Objection, Linda's lawyer snapped. Speculation. Sustained, the judge said, but gave me a glance that didn't feel disapproving. Elise adjusted. Let's talk about the will. What was your understanding of your father's wishes? That I'd be taken care of. He always said he was proud of me, that he wanted me to keep the house, finish my work, live without worrying. And when you learned about the suppressed second will, I wasn't shocked, I said. I was vindicated because it meant I wasn't crazy, that he had loved me, that Linda's lies weren't stronger than his truth. Elise nodded, then gently held up a photo, the one of my grandmother on the beach. Do you recognize this woman? Yes, my grandmother, me. And what's significant about this image? She has a birthmark on her left shoulder, the exact same one I have. It's genetic. Proof of blood relation. Elise turned to the judge. Your Honor, we submit this photograph as Exhibit F. When I stepped down from the stand, my knees wobbled, but my heart felt steady. I passed Linda's table on the way back to my seat. Mark hissed, drama queen. But Linda didn't speak. Her hands were clenched. Her jaw was twitching. Her lawyer stood next, flustered, throwing around phrases like uncertain provenance and legal ambiguity. But it didn't land. Not really. The jury wasn't leaning in for him. They were leaning in for me. He called Linda to the stand. I watched her as she took the oath, calculated, poised, but not as polished as before. Her tone had the gloss of someone used to getting her way. Yes, Leonard and I had our issues, she said, and I always wanted what was fair for my children. Did you forge adoption papers? Of course not. Did you withhold a will? I was told it wasn't valid. I could see the cracks forming. Then Elise stood. Calm, deadly. Mrs. Monroe, did you know the second will named Olivia as the sole beneficiary? Linda blinked. No. Then how did your lawyer end up with it hidden in his private safe? Her mouth opened, closed. I don't know. And when you handed Olivia those documents at the funeral, what was your intent? To clarify things. It was better she knew. Better for whom, Mrs. Monroe? Silence. Better for you, so you could claim the estate. So your children could drive her father's car and move into the house without contest. I didn't. Did you love your stepdaughter, Mrs. Monroe? More silence. And in that pause, the entire room turned. I didn't need the gavel to know the truth had landed. The judge took longer than expected. 15 minutes turned into 30, then 45. The courtroom remained still, but the tension was suffocating, thick with unspoken what-ifs and last-minute prayers. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, fingers locked to keep from shaking. Elise said it was a good sign, that careful deliberation often leaned toward the side with more to consider. Linda, meanwhile, whispered furiously to her lawyer. Her kids sat behind her, arms crossed, faces pinched with disbelief. They had come in confident. Now they looked like passengers watching their ship take on water. When the judge finally returned, we all stood. His face gave nothing away. He cleared his throat. I've reviewed all submitted documentation, including both versions of the will, the forensic analysis of the adoption records, and the testimonies provided by both parties. Every breath in the room caught at once. It is the court's finding, he continued, that the most recent will drafted by Leonard Monroe is valid and enforceable. Furthermore, the adoption documents presented by Linda Monroe have been ruled fraudulent, based on expert forensic analysis. A sharp gasp behind me. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." My pulse thundered. Therefore, the inheritance is awarded in full to Olivia Renee Monroe, as per her father's final lawful testament. The words didn't land gently. They slammed into me. I was frozen. The judge looked directly at Linda. Given the deliberate concealment of evidence and the use of forged documents to influence probate proceedings, this court is recommending criminal investigation into potential conspiracy and fraud. Linda didn't move. Neither did I. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck, and just like that it was over, but not really, because some endings don't come with a sense of triumph, some come with breath, with the ability to breathe again. I stood slowly. Linda rose too, hands trembling now. Her lawyer whispered something sharp, urgent. She didn't respond. I turned toward her as she approached the aisle. For a moment it was just us, like the entire courtroom fell away. She opened her mouth, maybe to protest, maybe to beg. But I didn't let her. "You tried to erase me," I said quietly, voice steady. "But I was his daughter all along." She flinched like I'd slapped her, then walked past me. No words, no apology, just silence. I stepped out of the courtroom into the crisp October air, lungs finally filling without resistance. Jessica was waiting near the courthouse steps, phone already buzzing with texts. When she saw my face, she lit up. "You did it," she whispered. I nodded. Tears threatened, but they weren't heavy this time. "He chose me," I said, "and the truth chose me back." We stood there a long time before either of us moved, not because we didn't know where to go next, but because, for the first time in weeks, I wasn't being pushed out of my own story. I was standing in it, centered, solid, and unshakable. The house didn't look different. The same red bricks. The same wraparound porch. The same creaky gate that never quite latched, no matter how hard you tried. But everything felt different, because now I wasn't being escorted out with threats. I wasn't here with a 5-minute countdown ticking behind me. I wasn't trespassing. I was home. Legally, officially, irrevocably. The court papers were in my purse. The key, the real key, now slid easily into the front door. No more lock changes, no more shut-out silences. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. It was still empty. Linda and her kids had moved out fast once the ruling came down, taking their designer furniture and overpriced artwork with them. That suited me just fine. All the things they'd brought in made the house feel cold, disconnected. Now, with bare walls and scuffed hardwood floors, I could almost hear my father's voice echoing through the silence. "Always take your shoes off at the door, Liv. It's not about the carpet, it's about respect." I smiled, kicking off my boots like a ritual. Then wandered slowly through the hallway. The light in the kitchen caught in the same way it always had, soft gold spilling through the back windows, lighting up the old tile like a memory. I reached up and opened the cabinet over the sink. Still there. One of my old mugs, the blue one with the chipped handle. I used to drink cocoa from it after swim meets, Dad pretending not to notice the trail of wet footprints I left behind. I moved room to room like I was checking for ghosts. And in a way, I was. I half expected to find traces of Linda's bitterness clinging to the corners. A scrawled note, a broken frame, some cruel reminder that she'd nearly succeeded in rewriting my story. But there was nothing, just quiet and space and light. I ended in the study, Dad's study. The oak desk stood where it always had, heavy and commanding, as if it had roots in the floorboards. The scent of old paper and worn leather still lingered in the air. It made my throat tighten. I sat in his chair. Not out of nostalgia, out of necessity, because this was where I began again. I opened the center drawer and pulled out a fresh notepad, wrote one word at the top, "Thank you." Then I started the letters. One to Jessica, who had never once let me doubt myself for long. One to Elise, whose sharp mind and soft-spoken strength had helped carry the weight. One to Mr. Deeks for his quiet clarity. And one to Detective Brooks, who had told me to keep my head down and still fought tooth and nail to lift the truth up. Each stroke of the pen felt like closure, not just to the case, but to the part of me that had once needed permission to take up space. My phone buzzed as I sealed the last envelope. "Brooks, official indictment is in." Linda and Greaves will both be facing charges. You're free, Olivia. I stared at those words until they blurred. You're free. Not just legally. Emotionally. Spiritually. I walked out onto the back porch, let the October breeze kiss my skin, and looked out over the yard where Dad used to build bonfires in the fall. The grass was patchy, and the garden was overgrown, but it was mine now. To mend, to rebuild, to grow again. A neighbor waved from across the fence, Mrs. Halprin, who used to bring us baked peaches in the summer. She smiled. "Good to see you back, sweetheart." I smiled too. It's good to be back. A year later, the house didn't just feel like mine. It was mine, lived in, loved in, reclaimed. The walls were no longer silent, they carried laughter again. Jessica's mostly echoing from the kitchen as she burned garlic bread for the third time in a row. "Don't judge me," she called over her shoulder, waving a potholder like a white flag. "Ovens in rich people houses cook faster." "You've lived here for 3 months," I laughed, pouring wine into mismatched glasses. "At this point, it's sabotage." Across the dining table, Detective Brooks chuckled as she leafed through one of the brochures I'd printed earlier that day. The title read, "The Haven Foundation, Inheritance Justice for Children and Families." I'd spent months building it, drawing from everything I'd been through, every tear, every lie, every paper trail. I wasn't a lawyer or an investigator, but I had one advantage those titles didn't give you. I knew what it felt like to be erased. And I had no intention of letting anyone else go through that alone. "This is going to change lives," Brooks said, setting the brochure down. "You're doing real work, Olivia." I felt my cheeks flush. I just kept thinking if I'd believed Linda a little longer, if I hadn't had Jessica or Deeks or you, I might have walked away. I might have let her bury me. Jessica raised her glass. "To the girl who refused to stay buried." "To the woman," Deeks corrected gently, lifting his glass too, "who dug up the truth." I smiled, quiet and full. The dining room wasn't fancy, hand-me-down chairs, a thrifted table, but it was whole, full of warmth, full of people who showed up when it mattered most. Behind me on the bookshelf sat the framed photo of Grandma me at the beach, shoulder turned just so. Next to it, a copy of my father's restored will. And beside both, a small brass plate I'd had engraved. "They tried to bury the truth." I dug it back up. That was the motto of the Haven Foundation. It was more than a slogan. It was a promise. To every child who'd ever been pushed aside by greed, to every family torn apart by manipulation, to every girl who'd ever stared into the mirror and asked, "Am I really who they say I am?" The answer was no. We are who we know we are. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the house had gone quiet again, I sat at the desk in my father's study, now mine, and opened my journal. There was nothing urgent left to fix. No fire to put out, no lie to disprove. But there was still something I needed to write. "Dear Dad, you didn't leave me behind. You left me everything that mattered, your name, your strength, your quiet love. They tried to cut me out of your story, but you planted me in every page. And now I get to keep telling it. For you, for others, for me." I closed the journal slowly. No tears, no trembling, just peace. Because the house was no longer haunted by betrayal. It was lit from within by truth, by purpose, by legacy. And I was no longer the girl who walked out of a funeral broken. I was the woman who came home and stayed.